welcome to a special series, The Mentors. I'm Shireen Bhan. As a build-up to the 10th year of the India Business Leader Awards, we've got India's inspiring entrepreneurs and top business leaders playing guru to the nation's brightest B-school minds and Gen Y entrepreneurs. Joining us today is country head and CEO at HSBC India, Naina Lal Kidwai. She plays mentor to 3 students from FMS Delhi, Anmol Alawat, Vedant Katiyar and Rasik Pansare, and answers all their questions on leadership and growth. Let's take a look.
Let's take a look at who the 3 students from FMS Delhi are.
Let me ask you, what are your biggest challenges? Because then maybe we can look at and think of ways together as to how to tackle those challenges. What is your biggest worry? Is it money? Is it market? Is it the idea?
Actually, money is a big criteria. So I just wanted to ask this, that since banks, they have the major chunk of the money of the country. So will ever the banks be open to giving loans to startups? Will that ever happen?
I fear not, because banks, by the way they're positioned, banks are basically funded by deposits of people like you and me.
Yes.
And it's very important for banks to be able to therefore repay the deposits. So banks are custodians of deposits. So banks have to make sure that they can recover the loans that they give out. And therefore, by definition, a startup is fraught with risk. So traditionally, startups would get their funding really therefore more from equity. Angel money would be, your mother, brother, sister, yourself. Venture capital, which is fortunately now growing in India. That's been an issue otherwise. And finally, private equity. Graded exactly the way I've said it. Initially angel funding, then venture capital, then private equity. Because equity by definition is riskier, and people there are trained to look at the opportunity. And I think if you're lucky enough to find, say, a firm, as against just angel funding, and a mentor within that group that is funding you, because with the experience they have of startups, it can also be a big help to you. But the funding story is not an easy one. But the good news is there's a flow of money coming there. But you feel money is going to be your biggest issue.
Initially, because it is investment heavy.
And you have people that come readily to work for you, because you would need help as well.
Yes, ma'am. So that is another challenge which I personally feel is one of the greatest for any startup, because it's not just the idea which takes you ahead, it's the team who executes. Because I think ideas are out there everywhere with billions of people in the world. Ideas are commonplace. It's the team who executes them, I think, is the one who makes or breaks it. But when you start up with your friends, there are many personal issues, there are many other commitments, and then there's someone who's going to lead, whereas someone who has to sometimes follow. Then how do you delegate, and how do you manage the personal ambitions, motivations?
No, it must be a very tough leadership challenge. So I would imagine the one thing that drives you is the desire to succeed. Because if you have that one goal, then you're all aligned around that goal to succeed. So hopefully that becomes the cementing factor, that everyone's putting their shoulder to the wheel, knowing that we have to pull together. But it's true that once the dynamics start going wrong, and it's anywhere, it can happen in a team, in a large corporate as well. When the dynamics go wrong and everybody's pulling in different directions, of course it gets in the way. So you have to pick your friends well and make sure that when you start, that they are people who are like-minded, like you, but also people who have a similar mission, and who at the end of the day also give you the emotional quotient, the EQ to hold together.
There are many times troubled times during the startup's initial times.
Everything is difficult.
Exactly. So sometimes the motivation, the goal that you have inside, sometimes it becomes a little further away. Sometimes it becomes hard to see what
it's like a bigger mountain to climb.
Yes, ma'am. So at such troubled times, how would you have led a team, let's say, because you're such a reputed leader?
Well, I'm going to be really hearing more from you guys, because you will have the answers in you. You don't need those answers from me. But what about you?
Ma'am,
one of the biggest challenges that we guys face, it's not really a challenge, but we've all read the Blue Ocean strategy and how you should look for blue oceans. And India, I guess, has a lot of blue oceans which just haven't been discovered yet. One of the blue oceans that we've currently, and I've currently started working on, is the aggregators and how organized India's sectors need to be and how unorganized they are currently. Yeah. And hence just figuring out where to go, whether to actually listen to the customers, going by what exists or going by what should exist is a big challenge.
Well, I'm sure that at the end of the day, those insights provided by those that have done things a traditional way are valuable. But of course, you have open to you just a lot more thought and the ability to connect them with modern technology, which they may not have thought of. And I was just today, I was up at the crack of dawn on a flight from Bombay, and I met a friend who was telling me about the farmers that are growing grape in Nasik. Now, these are traditional farmers, but how are they getting their grapes out to Stockholm and Europe and markets such as this? And the way it's working is their sons, apparently, and I would like to believe daughters too, but are in fact the ones who are bringing modern technology and thought, because they're educated, both in one case were in fact studying abroad, and they're bringing those ideas of marketing and ability to connect who is a very simple farmer, but who's now made a lot of money doing traditional farming, but connected him to the market. So how to get his grapes to the markets of Europe. And it's sometimes as simple as that, because it's really, at the end of the day, the logistics of it, but also the establishing the connect with the buyer. And if that's all it's about, and then it's about finding the right connect. You also asked about, so what happens when things get difficult, which they are going to, and what keeps you going? So what keeps you going? And you guys, you've been in startups before. What keeps you going?
Actually, any startup, whenever I think of a startup, I just think that if I want to achieve something, because what I want to achieve is, I want to get, in my life, I want to have $1 billion. That is my target.
Yeah. That's all, not just $1 billion.
$1 billion.
1 million.
Billion.
1 billion. See, $1 billion.
So if $1 billion, what I saw is, I started searching, looking for who is the highest paid CEO of a company.
Yeah.
Then I got to know that if I become the CEO also, I won't become a billionaire.
Yeah.
So I thought I need to do a startup only. That is the only option.
So there you are. So you were very clear. You wanted to become a billionaire and this was the way to do it. So that'll keep you going. That's great.
For me, ma'am, it would be, let's say, I see from a more philosophical point of view. I believe that our creations outlive us. So my dad was also an entrepreneur. He was in fact in the construction business. So he's no more now, but I still, whenever I go in our hometown, I can see the buildings he had constructed in 2 decades back.
Really?
So it's like he's no more, but his creations are still there.
Yeah.
And so basically that kind of given me inspiration there. Whatever you create.
Yeah.
So very rarely in a rigid corporate structure you can create and claim that it's just yours.
Yeah. So you want to do that, build your next Eiffel Tower or Empire State Building in art. And you, Anmol?
Ma'am, I go by freedom and change.
Yeah.
I think those are the two things that
you don't want to be tethered to a...
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I come from an army background, and I've roamed around the hills of Himalayas and all of... So I love traveling.
Yeah.
I think I really like my freedom, and during those travels I've seen the kind of people and the kind of diversity that exists, which one forgets about when you're sitting here in a Delhi.
So you can't stand being in an office. Oh my God.
I can't stand being in an office.
Imagine having to sit in those 4 walls around you.
Yes, ma'am. And the second thing that I've seen, in fact with a partner of mine, that in terms of the education sector, in terms of how people, what defines life at a decent level for different people. People are struggling for 300 rupees of an education for a child in the slums of Mumbai, whereas we spend 3,000 bucks on a hotel bill. But that's the difference, and I think information might just be the key to actually change all of that, because how people get information and how people can use that information can actually drive them to bring about their own change.
You are so right. I mean, I've seen how one of the initiatives we supported from the bank was something called a Mandeshi school, and it's a microfinance sort of in very bank working in very poor areas of Maharashtra. We sponsored the school, and all it did was it trained what was illiterate women how to have very little financial literacy, so that with information on the mobile phone she was able to gauge at what price to sell her vegetables. She was basically a vegetable vendor, but which mandi to go to and from what those prices what to sell her vegetables at. So information, and that was all it was, and of course a little bit of skill in terms of how to make money, and today she employs others to do that. So information can be very empowering if it's given to the people who least have it. So fabulous, and I think we have many examples of this, like ITC, the e-Chopals and all worked in that direction. So it's great that you're looking at that. So I think, you know, you guys have the answers. When things look difficult, just remember what your goal is. And I think some of the biggest lessons when I look back on my life was when things went wrong. You know, when things are going right, you're just sort of going on doing the same thing, and you stop looking left and right because you're just trudging along the same path. But it's when you fail that you begin to question, and some of the brightest ideas come to you, because what you learn from your mistakes can be phenomenal. But if you didn't learn from the times that you fell flat in your face, that would be a real shame.
One of the things I observed is that, you know, in India, especially when Modi started the Make in India campaign, so we want to make in India. We are trying to, you know, brand India as a manufacturing hub. But that's more, I think, more like a incentive for the outside investors to come here and start making in India. Because when I look around and I see that if young entrepreneurs like me want to start manufacturing in India, there's a big hurdle. China, for example, China is a very formidable player in this industry. So whenever you have an idea, you might have the circuit design also. You might have some product design. But then you realize that the cost of manufacturing it, getting it manufactured and transported from China is much cheaper than actually manufacturing it here yourself.
So there's got to be some sweet spots, right? I mean, today, so you're right, you have to pick something that you're not going to get competed out even before you start, because the price point is wrong. But we have many companies in India today. I was just talking to a friend of mine before coming here, who is a supplier of a particular part to GE, and because his price point is lower than others who supply GE has quite unusually made him, I think he pretty much said, sole supplier for that part. So he's in the supply chain for a big company, and he's been able to demonstrate quality and cost, both advantages, and he's a monopoly supplier, which means that GE will always look after him because they can't afford to have him go. So I think one of the secrets has to be that India has to become part of global supply chains. I would worry about being a supplier to just one OEM, because maybe at one level you get very dependent as well, and you can get squeezed too. But it's a great starting point, and these companies are looking for suppliers that are reliable and cost effective all the time. So it's quite possible that in some spaces where, you know, India is known, and I think we've done very well in auto parts, if you look at it, where we are often a significant supplier to many OEMs, is a classic example. So it may be that we have to find the spots, and it doesn't have to be to a company abroad, it can be to Indian companies.
Ma'am, I just had this curiosity, if a leader like you, who's in position and talking to all the industry leaders around the world and some decision makers here and there, government, private sector, everywhere, so maybe you of course have more exposure to how the trend is going to be in future than someone like us, students in B school. So if you were to,
I wish that was true, but anyway.
No, you're being honest, but if my question was, if one day you were to wake up in the morning and you realize that you are just of our age, of let's say 25-year-old, and with just 2-3 lakh rupees in your bank account, and you were like having an entrepreneurial mindset, then what would you start up?
That's a great question. I'd probably be in such a nervous sweat I'd go right back to sleep again. I wouldn't know what to do. It's I think for you guys, the world is out there, so that's the great thing. And the entry barriers, the same entry barriers that cause you lack of sleep at night, because you're saying, well, everybody's out there doing the same thing, is also the advantage, because you don't need 2 lakhs of rupees to think up some of the ideas that we are seeing come through. And I think in the e-space, whether it's e-commerce or consumer insights, being aggregators, being the marketplace, I think that is really where the investments are lower than they might have been if you were setting up a bricks and mortar plant. So that's the good news. You don't need that much money. What you need is a great idea.
Another thing was, you've had one of your degrees, undergraduate degree from University of Delhi and another one from Harvard. Ma'am, what kind of changes do you see and should be brought about in the Indian education system just to develop that kind of an entrepreneurship culture that Harvard has in comparison?
Well, HBS is developing a strong entrepreneurship culture, which was not known to be. The years when I went there in '82, it was very much of, well, let's join investment banking, which is what I did, and consulting. The whole world of entrepreneurship was still there, so you had some that would join, venture capital, but today it's a very different place in terms of the encouragement to entrepreneurship. And I think what we do in terms of the education in India is clearly something's right, because our kids go abroad, they get into the best schools, and they do really well. They do well abroad, they do well when they come back here. So I don't want to knock our system, but I don't think at the bachelor's degree level we get the education that we could really benefit from in terms of being able to think and apply the thinking as against learning and the learning by rote. That transition, you see it to some degree at the school level with the IB. You get it in the US undergraduate system, which gives a lot more flexibility also, because the courses are so wide and you don't have to decide what you're doing till almost 2 years into the degree, particularly if you're in liberal arts. And I think those flexibilities are very interesting, because they give young people a chance to figure out what they're really suited to. Because at the end of the day, if you're not going to have fun doing what you want to, studying further or starting a company, then what's living about?
One problem I think we usually have, young entrepreneurs in India have, is that we see a lot of jugaad that we call the frugal innovation term. We see a lot of that around us, but we are not able to properly standardize it and commercialize it. We are not yet able to do that. I mean, some Chinese ideas really just, if you see the mosquito killing racket, we have seen, it's just a very jugaad kind of a thing only, but they have been able to commercialize it and send tons and tons of it around the world. In India we have a lot of frugal innovation around us, but we have not been able to commercialize it. So is there something missing, or are we
I actually think we're great in frugal innovation, right? Yes, because if you look at what we've done, and the big success stories are what we've got in the healthcare sector, where the ability to do heart operations, as in, exactly, and to do it at 1/20th of the cost of the US, or cataract operations, to again do it at 1/10th of the cost of a traditional Indian hospital. So these are also jugaad, and we've managed to come to it at a low cost point, which is affordable and scalable and commercially viable, that people are making money from doing it. So we actually do this quite well. Can we do more of it? Sure. Do we need more of it? Absolutely. We have still not in banking found a solution, a low cost mobile solution which can bring the 40% of Indians that don't even have a bank account into banking, which is something that they're comfortable with. The person will typically have a mobile phone, but we're not able to take the bank to him. And if you look at what Vodafone achieved through M-Pesa in Africa in terms of money transfer, it was a great innovation, cost-effective, filled a niche, and the ability to allow people to transfer money on a mobile phone is something that we are still awaiting to be permitted in India. There's a regulatory issue, the technology and the application is now well known. So we need low-cost provisions of services, we need these low-cost provisions of healthcare, we need low-cost provisions of every social service, education, I mean, you name it, it's required. And so I would say more jugaad the better.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of The Mentors. Next week we head down south to Bengaluru as Chairman Emeritus of Infosys, N.R. Narayanamurthy, shares his experience and wisdom with students from IIM Bangalore. Until then, from the entire team, many thanks for watching.
The amount of experience and the kind of insights that ma'am shared with us were brilliant. And on top of that, I think ma'am kind of gave us a feedback where she says that we guys have the answers to pretty much everything, and if we just have to look through the opportunities that are available in India at this particular moment, and that will be the key for future entrepreneurs in India.
The session was extremely exciting. First thing, it was a great opportunity to meet her personally. This is the first time I met her. And other thing is, we got advice related to our startups. We discussed our startup with her, and she gave her extremely personal insights about her life and how we can apply that in a personal startup.
The one big thing that I remember today, which she said, is that whatever is going to be a factor which is going to be a threat to us could also be an advantage. Anything which is a threat can also be an advantage. That's one big takeaway.